Okay, let's unpack this. We are starting this deep dive in a place that's supposed to be, the very definition of serenity, the sacred Greek island of Patmos.
Mm, it's tiny. 9 miles long, 13 square miles total. Just this ribbon of fertile valleys and rocky hills in the Aegean.
And it's known globally as this ultimate spiritual sanctuary. This is the spot where, according to tradition, St. John the Evangelist had the visions that became the Book of Revelation.
It's a place just steeped in spiritual authority. People go there for monastic silence, for contemplation. It's a world away from, well, from the modern world.
And yet right there, on this island revered for its peace, a crime happens that just shatters that entire facade.
It's the premeditated murder of a holy man, Monk Facilis, highly respected, throat cut, right in the middle of the town square.
And the timing is just audacious. It's right before Easter, which is the holiest time in the Orthodox calendar.
The audacity of it immediately tells you this is not just some local tragedy. This isn't common criminality. The sources we have label it a special crime.
A special crime, right. And that means it has these staggering implications for the Greek Orthodox Church, for Greece itself, and as we'll see, for the delicate balance of global religious politics.
The stakes are immense.
Hmm.
And they're not just theological, they're financial, geopolitical. They're all tangled together. We're not just looking for a killer here.
No. We're diving deep into why someone would commit an act that is, it's an absolute affront to the Greek Orthodox faith and national identity right at the heart of their spiritual world.
That's the core question. What information did this monk possess?
So our mission today is to take this stack of sources we have. We've got law enforcement notes, details from the investigation by Chief Inspector Andreas Kaldis. We have testimony from the powerful abbot of Patmos, and some really deep cuts into the history of the Eastern Orthodox Church.
And with all that, we're going to try and understand what was so dangerous about what Monk Facilis knew that it required his professional execution.
And more importantly, how this one murder on a tiny island unmasked a massive, horrifying international plot that was hidden right inside Greece's most revered spiritual centers.
It's the ultimate collision, isn't it? The spiritual and the temporal, the sacred and the profane, all of it engineered by a master manipulator. And you, the listener, are right here with us as we start peeling back the layers.
So let's begin with the scene itself. The victim is Monk Facilis, a man who had dedicated 40 years to the church, beloved by the community, known for his devotion.
And he's found murdered, as we said, a professional cut to the throat on the Sunday before Easter.
The time of death is estimated somewhere between 2:30 and 3 in the morning.
And when the authorities get to the scene, the details are immediately suspicious. His clothing, his hat, his robe, his sandals, they're all covered in blood, which confirms the struggle was brief or maybe non-existent.
But the real tell is what was taken.
Yeah.
And what was left behind.
Everything of material value was taken except for the monk's crosses. That detail is an immediate red flag for the investigative team.
Right. If this was just a frantic mugging, a common thief trying to get some quick cash, they'd take everything, right? They wouldn't stop to selectively leave religious items.
Especially a cherished family heirloom, which was left around his neck. No, the missing items tell the real story. His computer was gone.
A treasured, high-end laptop, a gift for his 40th year in the church.
Exactly. And all his digital discs, gone. The killer was looking for one thing: digital information. The material loss was secondary. The information was the entire point.
And what follows is just a critical series of blunders by the local Patmos police that almost derails the entire investigation from the get-go.
Well, first, you have Chief Inspector Andreas Kaldis, the investigator for special crimes, flown in by helicopter from Athens.
And we should note, the island has no airport. That helicopter ride just emphasizes how isolated this place really is.
So he arrives at the local station, expecting to be whisked away to the crime scene to get started immediately.
But instead, he finds the local captain completely preoccupied with what the sources call political nice.
Yeah, he's just unwilling to meet with the chief inspector of special crimes right away. But that's not even the worst of it. The crucial blunder involves the body.
Oh, this is unbelievable. The local sergeant, Mavros, he confirms to Kaldis that the body had already been moved. It was taken back in the monastery, being prepared for the funeral.
Moving a body from a murder scene? It's rule number one. You don't do it.
And the reason they gave: it was considered disrespectful to leave a holy man dead in the middle of the town square during Easter week.
And you have to wonder, right, is that the real reason? Is it just about decorum? Or was the local captain already being manipulated? even this early on?
That's a great question. In hindsight, it seems highly probable, but at the time, it just highlights this friction between civil law and the overwhelming spiritual priorities of the island.
And that single decision severely compromised the crime scene. It robbed the Athenian investigators of crucial forensic evidence, trace evidence, foot traffic, blood spatter analysis, all of it gone.
Kaldis is, you can imagine, visibly furious. He knows how hard it's going to be to reconstruct what happened now.
But even with all that chaos, Kaldis and his partner Koros, they draw a really powerful insight from the photographs that were taken before the body was moved.
Yes, he forces the Patmos captain to look at the photos with him, to really see them.
And the professional insight is immediate, and it's shocking. The body showed no other marks, no other stab wounds.
No defensive cuts on his arms or hands, no sign of a desperate last-minute struggle.
Just that single, precise cut to the throat. It was administered at the point that's most difficult to defend against, likely while Vasilis was already incapacitated or maybe even asleep.
And that one detail changes everything. It shifts the profile from a frantic mugging or some random attack to something far more calculated, far more sinister.
It screams professional, premeditated murder. The killer was efficient. They knew exactly where and how to strike to silence the victim quickly and definitively.
This wasn't a crime of passion. It wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was a targeted hit. Vasilis was silenced because of something he knew.
So once they've established the nature of the crime, the focus has to shift. It goes from the body to the source of all power on Patmos, the abbot.
The investigation leads them to Abbot Christodoulos, who apparently took his name from the monastery's founder back in 1088.
And Kaldis' visit to the abbot's chamber is really telling. The room is filled with priceless icons, ancient texts, priceless artifacts. It sends a very clear message to this visiting detective.
Yeah, the message is this is a very old, very holy, and very rich bastion of church influence. This is something far bigger than just the small island of Patmos.
Initially, the abbot is evasive. He tries to play down Vasilis' involvement in anything controversial. He claims the monk was unusual.
Unusual, right. And that he avoided politics, preferring to focus on his church work. But, I mean, how could a man dedicated to the Greek Orthodox Church for 40 years completely avoid the massive internal politics that were facing the entire global structure at the time?
Kaldis presses him on that exact contradiction. He suggests that Vasilis must have been involved in something if he had a secret, unbacked-up laptop that he was killed for.
And under that pressure, the abbot finally reveals the core, terrifying tension, this global crisis that's surrounding the fate and the future leadership of the entire 300 million-member Eastern Orthodox Church.
And crucially, he confirms the missing evidence. The stolen computer and disks contained, in his words, personal work, much of which was never backed up on the monastery's own elaborate system.
And the timeline of the theft is just vital here, isn't it?
Absolutely. The abbot confirms the room was sealed just minutes after Vasilis' death was discovered. This means the killer had an incredibly narrow window.
Either they ransacked the room before the murder, or they did it in that tiny 30 to 60-minute gap between the time of death and the moment the abbot himself showed up and sealed the door.
The thief was highly skilled, highly targeted, and unfortunately highly successful in getting what they came for.
So we move from what looks like a local murder to a full-blown global crisis. The abbot is basically suggesting this professional hit is directly tied to an existential threat facing the entire Eastern Orthodox Church.
Yeah, this is high-stakes geopolitics, but it's all disguised as theology.
And what's so fascinating here is how the spiritual heart of the church is completely dependent on the whims of a secular government, in this case, Turkey.
Right. Since the Great Schism in 1054, the center of the Eastern Church has been fixed in Constantinople, which is now Istanbul.
And the ecumenical patriarch, who is the spiritual head of the entire worldwide Orthodox communion, is essentially trapped by the Turkish constitution.
He has to be a Turkish citizen, and he has to be a graduate of an authorized Turkish university.
And here's the fatal flaw. This is the ticking time bomb the abbot was so afraid of. Back in 1971, Turkey closed the Holy Theological School on Halki Island.
And that seminary was the only pipeline for training the patriarchs. The current patriarch is one of the very last graduates of Halki. So with that school closed for decades, well, unless the law suddenly changes, there might soon be no one left who is legally qualified to lead the church from Constantinople.
This succession crisis just throws the doors wide open for major power plays. It forces the Orthodox world to start considering a new headquarters.
And the Russians, who have the most members, We're talking hundreds of millions across Russia and its former satellite states. They've long claimed leadership. They want Moscow to be the third Rome.
You can just feel the abbot's fear in the source material. If the Patriarchate is forced out of Constantinople into the arms of Russian state control, Russia would instantly gain this immense soft power.
Oh, huge. They'd be influencing the spiritual lives, and by extension, the political leanings of vast populations in all those former satellite nations. It would be a catastrophic shift in the post-Cold War balance of power.
And on the other hand, the Western powers in Greece, they historically kind of liked the Patriarch being isolated and, let's be honest, pretty powerless in Istanbul.
Of course, it prevented the rise of a unified, powerful Eastern Orthodox leader who might, challenge the West's view of world order or NATO interests in the region. The status quo was precarious, but it was stable.
But that status quo is failing. So if Constantinople fails and Moscow is seen as completely unacceptable, where does the spiritual heart of Eastern Orthodoxy go?
The sources all confirm what was considered the obvious and natural choice: Mount Athos.
Mount Athos is revered as the Garden of the Mother of God. It's the world's oldest surviving monastic community, a semi-autonomous monastic state right there in the Aegean, home to 20 sovereign monasteries.
Its history, its spiritual purity, and its separation from direct Greek civil law make it the absolute perfect candidate to house the new patriarchate. It would preserve the church's independence.
But the very idea of Mount Athos becoming this new spiritual center brings up the shadow of a huge scandal.
The highly publicized Mount Athos scandal? Yes. This alleged fraudulent land swap and money laundering scheme that was all over the news, particularly linked to the 2004 Athens Olympics.
And this is where Dmitry comes in. He's the local taverna owner and a self-identified former spook who specialized in Eastern European intelligence.
And Dmitry introduces the core theory that really drives this whole conspiracy. He posits that the entire Mount Athos scandal was strategically cooked up by the Russians to embarrass the Greek church.
You have to admire the cynicism of that motive if it's true. If Mount Athos is going to be the spiritual home for the entire Orthodox world, it has to be seen as pure, as incorruptible.
Right. So by associating one of its oldest and most respected monasteries with financial fraud, this land swap scheme that allegedly transferred state-owned land to the monastery for almost nothing, the Russians could use the media and public perception to just destroy the credibility of Athos.
It's a brilliant, cynical geopolitical move. If the global public, and especially the Orthodox faithful, see this proposed new headquarters as a den of corruption, you destroy its legitimacy as an alternative to Moscow.
The Russians don't need bombs. They weaponize finance and public perception to secure their own bid for theological leadership.
And Dmitry explicitly connects this whole volatile situation to the victim, to Vasilis. He says they would often discuss this political mess, and Vasilis was obsessed with proving that things were not as they seemed regarding the Russian involvement.
So Kaldis starts to realize that Vasilis had perhaps found proof, not just of the Russian intelligence operation, but also of who they were working with inside Greece.
As Kaldis notes to his partner, if any of what he told us is true, or if he's working for somebody who's trying to make us think it's true, we could be in the middle of some very deep shit.
And just like that, a single murder investigation has transformed into a search for the truth, hidden inside a high-stakes international church war over spiritual and global dominance.
So Andreas returns to Athens. He's frustrated, feels momentarily defeated. He's only confirmed the high stakes and the theft of the laptop. But then later, he's reflecting on the case next to his partner, Leela, and he has this classic aha moment.
And it's about the crosses, the ones found at the scene.
He focuses on this strange dichotomy. Vasilis's priceless family heirloom cross was left around his neck untouched. But the cross he was found clutching in his hand, it was cheap.
A 10-euro, silver-colored tourist cross, square-edged, and they find out it was bought just hours before his death.
So why would a man dedicated to the church for 40 years die clutching a piece of cheap tourist junk instead of his priceless family heirloom?
It makes no sense. Unless it was a deliberate choice to draw attention to this otherwise useless object.
Andreas has this realization. He didn't die accepting the end of his life. He died sending a message.
So he has to get back to Patmos immediately to re-examine that cross.
Yeah.
And he makes this decision to take the sort of stolen cross to the most sacred place on the island.
The monastery of the Apocalypse, the holy cave of St. John, the birthplace of the Book of Revelation. It's a very symbolic location for a moment of truth.
And while he's there, just thinking about the case, the moment of revelation is almost accidental. He stumbles, reaches out instinctively with the hand that's holding the cross.
And he drives it right into a stone wall. The cheap metal cross just breaks.
And that accidental break reveals everything in one stunning moment. The bottom part of the longer leg separates from the rest of the cross, and he sees it's hollow.
Concealed inside is a tiny USB flash drive, small enough to fit securely inside the sheet metal cross, hidden beneath the lanyard wrap.
Vasilis's last act was to hide the evidence in plain sight. He knew the killer was a professional, focused on the valuable laptop, and would completely miss the true clue.
The killer ransacked his room for the laptop and the discs, but missed the one piece of evidence the monk literally died to protect.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
But you have to ask, if Vasilis wanted to send a message, why risk this? Why not just encrypt the information and leave a note with a code?
Because an encrypted file is useless if the laptop it's on gets stolen. And a note with a code is easily found during a search.
The physical act of clutching the cross at the moment of death. That was the final lock. The killer assumed the valuable digital goods were the target. The only way to find this drive was through accidental destruction. It was a desperate measure from a man who knew his end was coming.
So what was on this critical flash drive? Just 2 items.
2 photographs and a short cryptic document.
The photos both showed 21 clerics, identically posed in their full regalia, as if they were at the same ceremony. Specifically, the installation ceremony for the Protos, the head of Mount Athos.
But the digital deception here is really detailed by the computer guru, Elias. This wasn't just some simple Photoshop job.
No, his analysis revealed that the photos used identical bodies, but different heads had been meticulously superimposed. Someone spent a lot of time and care putting new heads on old bodies.
So the photos weren't pictures of an actual event. They were a blueprint. They showed the leadership structure of a potential usurping force within the church.
And the cryptic note confirms this. It just reads, "Prepare, for the time is in their hands."
This message, combined with the photos, 21 clerics, plus, in one photo, 3 empty chairs and a carpet, totaling 24 figures.
24 figures, often symbolizing church leadership after Christ's return. It suggests a group is trying to fundamentally change the church's leadership. The Protos later clarifies that Vasilis had doctored the photos to identify the conspirators, showing them in the positions of power they wanted to seize. With this recovered flash drive, the entire investigation shifts again, definitively. And the Protos, who we've established as the most powerful churchman on Mount Athos, he confirms that he personally requested Andreas Kaldis be put on this case.
And hold on, how can the Protos, the head of an autonomous monastic state 200 miles away, dictate who hands on a murder investigation on Patmos?
It just defines the power structure we're dealing with, right?
It speaks volumes about his influence. The Protos is the head of the holy community Mount Athos, this ancient sovereign entity. His spiritual and political power far, far surpasses that of the local abbot of Patmos, who's basically just a local administrator by comparison.
And the Protos explains to Kaldis that he used his connections. Specifically, he called the ex-prime minister to make sure the right investigator, an outsider like Kaldis, was chosen for the job.
And he admits that Vasilis was on his way to meet him on the very night of the murder, with proof that the entire narrative about Russian involvement was a sophisticated misdirection.
So Andreas now knows the real threat isn't Russia. It's someone operating from within the highest circles of the church, using those geopolitical fears as a cover.
And this is where Maggie, Andreas's legendary secretary, becomes instrumental in identifying the key player from those doctored photos.
The photos included an abbot who was missing from the real ceremony. He was the leader of the one monastery that had historically refused to attend the Holy Community assemblies.
And he had suddenly been brought back into the fold by this charismatic monk named Kalorgoros Zacharias.
Zacharias immediately fits the profile of the infiltrator who seems too good to be true. He was described as educated, multilingual, came from Switzerland.
And most tellingly, he sought no rank. He was the quiet, charismatic fixer who had earned massive respect, which made him seem pure and indispensable.
The full horrible revelation hits when Kaldis gets back to Athens, driven by this suspicion. Ilias, the computer guru, had done a targeted search on Vasilis's recovered laptop.
Right, focusing on the 30 days before his death, the monk's final feverish research.
And the single hit buried deep in the metadata was a file titled Thief in the Night.
This file contained 3 lists of monks, a list of journalists who were blaming Russia for the Athos scandal, and most damningly old newspaper articles, not from Greece, about a notorious war criminal.
A war criminal who had allegedly died in a fiery car crash in Switzerland years ago.
Maggie, using her vast network, connects the dots. She confirms Vasilis had already inquired with Swiss authorities about this war criminal's identity.
And the truth is just chilling. Calogero Zacharias, the beloved, humble, multilingual monk, is, in fact, the Balkan butcher.
A notoriously clever, ruthless war criminal who faked his own death with plastic surgery and used the monastery as a hiding place, and, more dangerously, as a nascent power base.
This moves the whole case from a theological dispute to state-level terrorism. The butcher's past involves rape, murder, genocide. His skills were Machiavellian.
The realization is terrifying. The entire conspiracy, designed to destabilize the Eastern Orthodox Church, wasn't run by a nation. It was run by a single, terrifyingly effective individual.
And this finally explains the obstruction back in Patmos. Andreas immediately confronts the Patmos police captain and forces him to confess to the cover-up.
And the captain admits it. The 3 missing monks who left Patmos before they could be interviewed, they came directly from Zacharias' monastery.
The captain, under extreme pressure, confessed he was covering up for his true friend Zacharias, who had supposedly helped those 3 men find salvation.
Which confirms the butcher's strategy. He built a private army of men with dark, compromising pasts, and he ensured their absolute loyalty through the promise of redemption and protection.
He didn't need Russian gold. He just needed human weakness. He had successfully burrowed his way into the church and local authority by cultivating zealots and loyalists.
The Protos was right to be terrified. The church, dedicated to spiritual matters, was, as he put it, not equipped to deal with someone of such horrible, ruthless cunning, because the butcher's methods, manipulation, coercion, political assassination, are purely secular tools.
So now Andreas has a war criminal on his hands who is being protected by a local police captain and shielded by a church hierarchy that's too terrified of a scandal to act.
He realizes the Greek authorities will never touch the butcher. The political cost of revealing the truth would just be catastrophic for everyone.
So he decides on this stunningly audacious, high-risk plan. He's going to use Russian intelligence to neutralize the threat for him.
The rationale is incredibly cynical, but it's strategically brilliant. The butcher had successfully pointed the blame at Russia. So Andreas' only option is to reverse that flow of information.
Make the Russians believe that they are the direct target of a plot that will embarrass them politically.
And by doing that, he activates their considerable intelligence apparatus to solve Greece's problem for them. It's essentially outsourcing justice via geopolitical self-interest.
The sting is set up in Mykonos during the chaotic, celebrity-filled Easter week. The target, the asset, is Vladimir Brusko, a rich Russian oligarch and powerful party figure who is known to frequent the island.
The goal is to leak stage information that directly threatens Brusko's political standing back in Moscow.
And this elaborate sting had to be flawless. Andreas, with help from his partner Koros and his former boss Tassos Stamatos, stages a drunken confrontation at the Vengera party bar.
The sources detail how they used Katerina, a well-connected local, and Lila's friend Barbara, who is described in the intelligence notes as the hottest piece of ass, as necessary bait to draw this high-rolling Russian in and get him to drop his guard.
Andreas pretends to be drunk and confides to Brusko that Vasilis was trying to prove the Russians were behind the Mount Athos scandal.
And this is the key, that the remaining evidence is just sitting unguarded at Barbara's house.
Brusko, terrified of the political exposure, immediately transmits this information to Russian intelligence, specifically to a man named Anatoly, a former head of KGB counterintelligence.
Andreas completely anticipated Brusko's reaction. Brusko sends his men to steal the staged flash drive and documents.
Which Andreas allows to happen.
Exactly. The point wasn't secrecy, it was activation. By transmitting this false threat to Russia, Andreas forces their hand.
And the Russian intelligence reaction is immediate and severe. Anatoly recognizes the butcher's capacity for this kind of Machiavellian ruthlessness.
He confirms that if Zacharias had succeeded in harming Russia, Anatoly himself would have been blackmailed or eliminated for failing to act. The political risk is just too high to ignore.
So the Russian intelligence apparatus moves, and it moves fast. They interrogate Zacharias' captured men, and critically, they get to Zacharias himself.
And that interrogation reveals the butcher's ultimate, horrifying, and incredibly complex plan.
A chemical assassination. Zacharias had somehow acquired the exact formulation of 2-alwellerin 3000, 7000, 7008 CDD dioxin.
That's the extremely potent poison that was used on the Ukrainian president Viktor Yushchenko.
And his target was the Russian abbot on Mount Athos, who just happened to be Russia's ultimate leader's favorite cleric. And the attack was planned for a dinner the very next evening.
This wasn't just murder. It was an act of state-level terrorism calculated for maximum political fallout.
An assassination of the Russian leader's most beloved cleric committed on Greek soil, using a poison that had a signature Russian link.
It would have politically ruined Russia's standing in the Orthodox world. It would have destroyed their credibility and made the Moscow alternative seem toxic. It would plunge the entire church into deeper chaos, which is exactly what the Balkan butcher wanted.
So the Russian objective shifts. It's no longer about defending their political image. It's about preventing a geopolitical catastrophe.
Russian intelligence immediately launches an abort mission to stop the delivery of the poison. Their operative, a man named Petro, intercepts Zacharias in Orinopolis.
Petro is equipped with an instantly debilitating gas canister, which is essential because they had to assume the dioxin itself was real and highly volatile. He meets Zacharias, who's disguised in worker's clothes.
And the butcher, in a moment that just reveals his true, ruthless nature, pulls a gun during the exchange.
Petro is forced to neutralize him with the gas.
Zacharias, the Balkan butcher, is captured by waiting Russian comrades and flown immediately to Moscow. He's interrogated, he breaks, and is ultimately executed. The order was, send that bastard back to his maker in hell.
Andreas's gamble paid off completely. A ruthless foreign power took out the domestic war criminal, ensuring the Greek political and church establishment avoided a public scandal, but at a massive moral cost.
And the immediate consequence of that Russian intervention is the official, high-level cover-up. Almost instantly, the Minister of Public Order contacts Andreas.
And he confirms the case is closed and orders him to drop the matter completely.
The message is absolute and it's politically pragmatic. The church will deal with this problem in its own way. It benefits no one and destroys many good people who were deceived.
It protects the integrity of the church, however fragile that integrity might be, by burying the truth about the war criminal, the dioxin plot, and the fact that a foreign power executed a Greek citizen on foreign soil.
And this is where we have to just pause and think about the moral ambiguity of it all. Did the political benefit preventing massive church destabilization, securing the future of the patriarchate, did that justify allowing a war criminal to be executed by a foreign power and covering the whole thing up?
The sources show the hierarchy clearly chose stability over transparency.
And the protos, the highest-ranking official involved in all this, he flies to Athens to meet Andreas. He needs to explain his deep complicity and the difficult, compromising choices he had to make.
He confesses the sheer terror that the hierarchy felt. The church, he says, was not equipped to deal with someone of such horrible, ruthless cunning.
So he had to rely on Andreas, someone from the secular world, to be their shield and sword.
The Protos views Andreas as their savior for having slain the dragon of Satan, which is how he refers to Zacharias.
And he says something very specific. He says it was a task that no one without sin could have done. This just reinforces the church's self-perception as being unsoiled, but utterly incapable of dealing with truly cynical temporal evil.
They outsourced their salvation.
And the Protos offers two very specific rewards for this. First, a spiritual one. He gives Andreas the treasured grandfather's cross that belonged to Vasilis. He explains that Vasilis wanted him to have it for his unborn child.
It's a personal blessing from the highest authority in that world, signifying forgiveness and acceptance.
And the second reward is temporal. He reveals that he made sure Dmitri, the taverna owner and spook, received his long-denied building permit as a reward for his assistance.
And that small act is the tangible proof confirming Dmitri's role as an intelligence asset for the church hierarchy. The Protos uses this small favor as a final political stroke.
It's a reminder to the local Patmos abbot that the hierarchy knows exactly what happened locally, and that trusting the wrong sort of person has consequences.
And finally, it's Leela, Andreas's partner, who provides the ultimate linguistic insight that just synthesizes the entire ethical dilemma of the case.
The Protos had carefully described his world as one that many think is unsoiled. It was a word he struggled to find, suggesting this deep, almost painful awareness of the gap between perception and reality.
And Leela, who loves anagrams, points out that the word unsoiled is an anagram for delusion.
And that lands with maximum thematic force. The Protos and the church hierarchy, in their desperate effort to preserve their spiritual image and their tradition, are living in a state of self-deception. They refused to acknowledge the deep structural corruption within their own ranks.
And that refusal, that delusion, was the very reason they needed a sinner from the temporal world, Andreas, to save them from a spiritual enemy who was, in reality, a war criminal.
The entire investigation, sparked by a single professional murder, revealed that the Great Church War wasn't between nations. It was between faith and the ruthless Machiavellian pursuit of power, exemplified by the Balkan butcher hiding under a monk's robes.
The ultimate question that's left hanging is whether the unsoiled world of the church can ever truly deal with the cynical reality of the temporal world without sacrificing its fundamental ideals.
They achieved stability, but it was at the cost of justice and truth.
So what does this all mean for the future of the Eastern Orthodox Church now that this immediate threat has been neutralized? Let's go back to those geopolitical stakes we established at the beginning.
Well, the elimination of Zacharias inadvertently secured the church's spiritual leadership in Constantinople for the foreseeable future. And it's all thanks to the protos.
Because he used his political connections, because he put himself directly in the line of fire, he's demonstrated his capability and his loyalty.
And more critically, as a result of this entire crisis, he is now the last remaining graduate of the closed Halki school.
Which, under Turkish law, makes the protos the only living person who is legally qualified to become the next ecumenical patriarch.
The crisis that triggered the whole conspiracy, the succession problem, has, through a horrific murder and a complex, dirty international sting, been solved, at least for one more generation, by the emergence of the protos as the singular candidate.
It's a profound, messy irony that's built on blood, deception, and the absolute necessity of political maneuvering. The church was saved by embracing the very temporal sin it claims to reject.
So we reflect on Vasilis's dying message, hidden in that cross. Prepare, for the time is in their hands. The source materials concludes that the time they were preparing for wasn't the second coming. It was the sudden, ruthless pursuit of temporal power right at the heart of the spiritual world.
And a final thought to mull over. If the church chooses to cover up the truth to preserve its own image, does that image truly remain worth preserving? We'll leave that with you.